Recording has started.
Okay, hi all. For anybody who doesn't know me, I'm Dr. Matt Frost, and I'm Deputy Director here at the Marine Biological Association, and also Head of Policy. So, what I want to talk to you about very briefly today is what's going on at the international perspective. I will say at the beginning, this is not going to be an in-depth analysis of international policy. You can do a whole degree in that subject. I just don't have time in 15, 20 minutes. It's going to be a very brief overview of what's being called the Ocean Superyear. But the main focus really today is in how the MBA is engaging in this and how you can engage. And that's the thing I hope to get out of this. So very quickly, I'm going to talk about the why and the what really. What is the super year of the ocean? Why are we having that? Then how the MBA is involved, and then the most important bit is how you can contribute. And I hope any of you listening to this will be inspired to get in touch and contribute to what is seen as a really important landmark for marine science. So just to begin with, some of you may have seen this in the media, but there's been a lot going on, not just about the ocean super year, but the focus is actually on the super year for the planet. So there's lots of reasons for this, but it's really around the fact that there are a lot of targets in legislation around biodiversity protection. There are a lot of things going on around climate agreements, very high level agreements there for lowering emissions and things around that. And all of this is sort of coming together at a really important time. So 2020 has actually been dubbed a super year for biodiversity generally, super year for the planet, as I've said, but really very important for the ocean. And you can see right at the beginning there, 2020 in the middle there, rather. 2020 is an important year. It is the ocean super year. This is our moment to take bold, united action for our planet. And this isn't just being pushed by the media or NGOs, it's actually being bought into the whole concept by government. And you can see there on the bottom right, our Environment Minister, Rebecca Powell, has talked about using this to head towards the 30 by 30 initiative, which is getting 30% of the planet's oceans protected by 2030. So this, as I said, this idea of 2020 being a super year for the environment, and particularly for the ocean, is being signed up to at the highest level by government and NGOs worldwide. So what does this actually mean in practice, other than nice sound bites and the media sort of reporting on it? Well, essentially, there's a lot of activity taking place, and most of it is really around some very key meetings and some very key agreements. So I'll very quickly mention these. I mean, this isn't all of them, but these are some of the ones that you may be familiar with. So the Intergovernmental Conference on Marine Biodiversity of Areas Beyond National Jurisdiction, which people usually just refer to as the BBNJ discussions, that's incredibly important. This is the fourth in a series of meetings, which is aimed at member states around the world coming to agreement on how we manage our high seas. So these are the areas that are beyond the 12-mile limit, the 200-mile limit, that owned by nobody. There's no real law other than the UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. So the idea is to take that and add some other agreements that cover marine biodiversity. This covers areas of the Arctic as well as, those big areas in the Atlantic, Pacific and other areas. So it's been seen as really key to protecting mobile species such as sharks, but also the deep sea in various other areas. Then you have the Ocean Conference, which I'll come back to, but that's part of the ongoing discussions and feeding into the UN decade. The IUCN World Conservation Conference. Once again, this is an annual conference, but this year in particular has been seen really important. And a lot of the thinking that goes on in that then becomes legislation at the highest level. Then there's the Biodiversity Conference in China, which is looking at the 80 targets. So this is all about how much of the planet we're actually going to protect, including ocean governance, and that's where that 30 by 30 comes in. and then the COP, the climate change conference, which obviously is huge news, and then finally our ocean. So this is just a selection of some of the really high level and very important, I have to say, negotiations that are taking place, essentially about managing the planet's resources. So don't underestimate, this, if this happens and all the discussions result in really good decisions, then that's why it would be seen as a super year for the planet. And all of this activity is also leading into next year, which is the launch of the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. I've actually given a few talks on this. I gave a talk to the fellows about this recently, and I'm sure I've given a talk to staff, but if not, well, I'm doing a little bit of it now. But this is once again is really important. This is 10 years where we're really talking about getting the scientific community. So this is where the science starts to really come in. The scientific community all brought together at a global level so that we've got all the knowledge gaps covered and we've got all the capacity we need to inform the previous discussion. So we can talk all we like about high seas treaties and 30 by 30 and things like that. But if there's no science behind it, then it doesn't mean anything. We can't achieve that. So the UN Decade is really about bringing the science to inform all the policy, and in particular, with the aim that we will then manage our oceans sustainably. And I'm sure you're all thinking this is incredibly ambitious. Yes, it is, but that's part of the point of having this super year, which leads into that. Now, we may as well get the elephant in the room out of the way. You're probably thinking, well, hang on a minute, this is a super year. As Maya alluded to in the introduction, most people would not equate the word super and 2020, together. And it is true that for this year, most of what I've just talked about has either been postponed or rescheduled. So, and there's one or two things at the end of the year that might happen, but most of these things has been postponed. Peter Thompson, the UN Secretary General, said with, I have to say, sort of amazing understatement, that the ocean super year has been diminished. The fact that we had all this incredible ambition and there's not a lot happening has got a lot of people genuinely concerned. You can see there, the ocean super year in disarray. And there was an article in one of the Lancet magazines recently saying much of the agenda has been blown out of the water by COVID. So you might think, okay, Matt said this is a great super year, but now it's not happening because of COVID. Well, that's not quite true. It's not as simple as that. It's been seen as too important to just not happen at all. So what is happening at the moment is basically everything is coming online. So if you look at this, there's a whole series of online seminars and webinars, which are really all being run under this banner of keeping the momentum for Ocean Action series. So we've been involved in some of these, which I'll come on to. And there's also the Ocean Decade virtual series, which has been launched. And, if I take one of these, for example, the youth participation one, you log into these and they have 1,000 people online, and then they have breakout groups for discussion. You have everything from high level government engagement to young scientists. And actually, this online community of people that are really engaged internationally is quite impressive. And quite exciting to be involved in. And as I said, most people have said this is too important. We can't just not have all these meetings and these discussions, so we must move online and keep a lot of this going. And as I've said, we're involved in most of these, which I'll come on to. And how are we involved? So this is one of the key questions. Well, we are registered as an official partner for the UN Decade. So if you go on to the United Nations website for the Decade, you'll see that the MBA is on there. We have our organizational profile, and that allows us to participate in a lot of these meetings, to be kept informed, and various other things that we can do. And most recently, what the United Nations have done to keep people engaged, because they want all the scientific organizations and societies engaged, is they've come up with a way where you can propose projects and actions. And I think this is a really important point to make. The All of this international stuff is very bottom up. It sounds top down because it involved governments, but most of the UN decade, for example, a lot of the activity at the international level, they're relying on NGOs and science partners and others to propose ways in which they're going to contribute. So this is something where they're waiting for us to propose what they're calling actions. So just one action we're involved in. So we were supposed to be running a World Congress for Marine Stations in Moscow in October, which I was leading with a number of others. You can see some of the organisers on there. And this is actually registered as an MBA action. So this is something the Marine Biological Association was taking the lead on with Japan, Russia, and various other people around the world, and working with the UK Foreign Office and others. It has been postponed. We're postponing it to the same time next year, but nevertheless, we are doing online versions of this, keeping the momentum going. So we've got something in October of this year where we're running a whole session between myself and a few others where we're talking about how marine stations, and remember, we have a marine station where most of us at the moment are sat in it, if we're at the headquarters in Plymouth of the association, that's where we're sat. And this is about bringing all those associations together to contribute at the international level to inform that policy through better coordination of the science. Also, it's worth pointing out that the NBA actually has special accreditation to get involved in a number of these things. So you can see there we have special accreditation for the UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon, which we were supposed to be attending, but once again, that's been postponed till next year. There's also an image there of myself and the other UK delegation at one of the UN meetings earlier this year before it all sort of got closed down. So often we're going with various other people from the UK. So the MBA is one of the partners with government and other agencies. And we often, even though we're representing the MBA, we're part of a UK delegation. And that was at a workshop in Halifax earlier. And I think the other thing is because we're registered with the United Nations, because we have this accreditation, we're also being consulted on a lot of the proposals that are going on. So we were consulted on the implementation plan for the decade, and as I said, there are various workshops, and I often point people here to those workshops. So, for instance, Dan Lear is going to be attending a workshop in a few weeks, which is done through this international framework as part of the Superyear and the UN Decade, looking at how marine data is being utilised at a global level. I think it's also important to say that we're not just doing this by ourselves. We're working with others. So, for instance, I chair the Marine Climate Change Impacts Partnership, and recently we've established an overseas working group, which I also chair, and all the government departments, so the Foreign Office, DEFRA, and various agencies sit on that group, and we're actually doing some work which is on the overseas territories. So we're working with people worldwide on producing a science document there, which is going to be presented at the UN COP, which is now going to be next year rather than this year. So it's still contributing to the Superyear, but the Superyear is going to spread into 2021, and we're going to have a key part to play in that. We also sit on the Marine Science Coordination International Working Group. So I attend those meetings, and once again, a lot of the stuff that goes on internationally, we will feed directly into via that mechanism. And also, there's a Plymouth International Working Group, which a few of us from the MBA now sit on, and that's looking at Plymouth as a presence. So, for instance, the MBA, Plymouth Marine Laboratory, and the University of Plymouth in particular are saying, well, rather than just turn up separately to the UN Oceans Conference, for example, why don't we work together and actually talk about what capacity there is in Plymouth to contribute to some of these discussions and inform the policy with the science, which is really what is at the basis of all of this. So finally, the most important question of all really is how can you get involved? So I've broken this down really to 4 key ways. So if you're listening to this talk, either live or in the recording, I hope this is the bit where you think, okay, that's what I'm going to do. So firstly, ask, engage. So what I mean by this is I've given various talks and updates and information via bulletins to the members, talks to the Plymouth Research Fellows. I do talks like this where I allude to different things going on. But I'm not the only person who should be doing policy or engaging in the policy. Everybody should be doing that. And as I said, I often pass on links and to meetings to other people where I think they'd be more appropriate. But please come and speak to me. Say, look, I'd really be interested in being involved in this. Is there any way you can see where me or my research group or my organisation or whoever you are can actually contribute? And I'm happy to talk to you about that. I would also say investigate. So that's the next thing. So I've talked about what's going on, but it's a very high level view. And I think a lot of people are realizing now that if they can align what they're doing, whether they're working in marine education or communication, or whether they're doing more fundamental research, if you can actually align what you're doing and show how it feeds into things like the Sustainable Development Goals and the Ocean Superyear and really inform that policy, it adds benefit to your work. So go online, look at what is happening, look at some of these discussions, look at some of these meetings, and see if there's some way of making the connection between what you're doing and what is happening, which is basically about saving our planet in the next decade. And if you have ideas around education and outreach, then come to me with them or contribute directly. So yeah, investigate. Thirdly, communicate. One of the issues that I really have, and we all have actually, is keeping track of who's engaged and who's involved at the international level. To the point where you'll turn up at a meeting somewhere halfway around the world and bump into a colleague from across the Hoe because you didn't realise you were going. We're trying to coordinate that through things like the Marine Science Coordination Committee, but please, if you are going to something or engaging in something internationally, if you get an invite to say we'd like you to contribute to the BBNJ discussions or to speak at this meeting, then please let me know, because it may be a case of me then being able to say, well, that's great, I'm there too, or I know somebody else is going there too, or actually fantastic because we don't have a presence there. So I would love for you to feedback on how you're involved in this. So communication is absolutely key. We have to do this together if this is going to work. And finally, respond. So we do put out requests constantly via the Marine Biologist magazine, via the membership bulletins and others, to respond to consultations, to come up with ideas. And we're completely open to that. I would love to have the problem of our inbox being full of people with lots of ideas and comments. And if you see the word consultation go out in a member's bulletin or somewhere else, then please get in touch. And if you're listening to this and you're not a member, A, get in touch anyway, and B, please look at this last slide, because this is the main thing I want to finish off on. Is that as the MBA, we don't engage in all of this as individuals. As I've said, we work with lots of other people locally, nationally and internationally. But I think it's also important that, I never represent myself or even just a small group of people. We at the MBA represent the global community of marine biology as the chartered body for marine biology. We have around 2,000 members, 6 continents, 40 countries. And we would say, please join us, because the more people we have as members, the stronger our voices together to speak into things like the Ocean Year and really look at essentially informing the next 10 years of managing our planet's resource as far as the ocean goes. So I'm going to finish there. I hope, I know that was a real whiz through. And as I said, it was a very high level and brief overview. Sorry, I couldn't go into depth in any of that, but I'm more than happy to take questions, and I hope I've just inspired you to at least engage with the whole process. So thank you for listening.